You're farming unlimited land, and you're still thinking flat. That's the single biggest mistake small acreage farmers make. You look at your quarter acre, your half acre, maybe your single acre, and think you've maxed it out. You think there's no room left to grow. But what if I told you that the smartest farmers in the world aren't spreading out? They're stacking up. They're layering animals, plants, and production systems on top of each other, turning 1 acre into what feels like 5. And they're doing it without buying more land, without bigger barns, and without burning themselves out. This isn't some trendy permaculture theory from a YouTube guru who's never touched manure. This is a proven method that small farmers are using right now to double and even triple their production per square foot. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how to stack 7 systems on your property. So every inch of your land is working for you. Every layer feeding the next, every square foot earning its keep. And the best part? You can start with what you already have. Here's the reality most small farmers don't want to admit. You bought your land thinking it would be enough. You started with chickens, maybe added a garden, maybe even a couple of goats, and now you're stuck. Your coop takes up one corner, your garden takes up another, your goats need their own fenced area, and suddenly, your entire property feels cramped, crowded, maxed out. Meanwhile, your feed bill keeps climbing. The average backyard farmer spends $1,200 to $2,400 a year on commercial feed alone. That's before vet costs, fencing, bedding, and supplements. And what are you getting back? A few dozen eggs a week and maybe some milk if you're lucky. You look at your neighbor with 20 acres and think, if only I had more space. You start browsing land listings, you calculate mortgage payments on acreage you can't afford. You convince yourself that real self-sufficiency requires real land. But that's a lie the commercial agriculture system wants you to believe. They want you thinking bigger means better. They want you buying more inputs, more feed, more infrastructure. Because every dollar you spend is a dollar in their pocket. The problem was never your land. The problem was your layout. Here's what they don't teach you in any modern farming manual. Stacking isn't new, it's ancient. Farmers have been layering production systems on small land for centuries. Long before tractors, long before feed stores, long before anyone had the luxury of sprawling acreage. In medieval Europe, a single cottage garden fed an entire family. Fruit trees overhead, vegetables below, chickens scratching through the rows, bees working the blossoms, rabbits housed along the fence line, ducks on the pond, every layer connected. Every output feeding another input. Nothing wasted, nothing idle. In Southeast Asia, farmers have run integrated rice-fish duck systems for over 1,000 years. The ducks eat the pests. The fish eat the duck manure. The rice feeds the family. 1 paddy, 3 harvests, 0 waste. These weren't primitive systems. They were brilliant systems designed by people who couldn't afford to waste a single square foot, because their survival depended on it. Then industrial agriculture came along and told everyone to specialize. 1 crop, 1 animal, spread it out, buy inputs, scale up, or get out. And that advice destroyed the small farmer's greatest advantage, the ability to stack production in tight spaces where every element supports every other element. The stacking method you're about to learn isn't something I invented. It's something I rediscovered. And once you see how it works, you'll never look at your land the same way again. Item 1 is the ground layer, chicken tractor rotation. The foundation of any stacking system starts at ground level, and nothing works the ground like a properly rotated chicken tractor. Here's the mechanism. Your chickens aren't just producing eggs, they're weeding, pest controlling, and fertilizing every bed they touch. A movable tractor on a 2-week rotation through your garden beds means each bed gets scratched clean, debugged, and loaded with manure before your next planting. One homesteader in Tennessee runs 12 hens through 6 raised beds on a quarter acre. Her feed bill dropped 35% because the chickens forage insects and cover crops as they rotate. Meanwhile, her vegetable yield jumped because every bed gets naturally fertilized before she plants. To set this up, you need a lightweight movable enclosure. Nothing fancy, PVC and chicken wire works fine. Plant a fast-growing cover crop like clover or rye in each bed ahead of time. Move your chickens onto it. Let them spend 2 to 3 weeks eating, scratching, and fertilizing. Then move them to the next bed. By the time you cycle back, the first bed has recovered and regrown. The chickens start all over again. 0 tilling, 0 chemical fertilizer, 0 wasted space. But this is just the floor. The next layer goes vertical, and that's where things get really interesting. Item 2 is the vertical layer, stacked quail systems. This is the layer most farmers completely ignore, and it's the one that changes everything on small land. Quail don't need pasture, they don't need floor space. They thrive in vertically stacked cage banks that take up almost no footprint on your property. Here's a number that will stop you cold. In the physical footprint of a standard washing machine, you can house 200 quail, producing eggs every single day. Try fitting 40 chickens into that same space. It's impossible. Quail are ready to harvest in just 6 to 8 weeks. Their eggs sell for $6 to $8 a dozen at farmers markets. And because you're building up instead of out, you're adding a complete protein production system without using a single extra square foot of ground. Set up a 4 to 6 tier cage bank along a wall, inside a garage, or in a shed corner. Each tier holds 20 to 30 birds. Provide fresh water, a simple game bird feed, and collect eggs daily. That's it. The quail manure drops into collection trays underneath each tier. And that manure, it feeds directly into the next layer on this list. Don't skip ahead. This connection is what makes the whole system work. Item 3 is the recycling layer, black soldier fly larvae. This is the hidden engine of the stacking method, the layer that turns every waste product on your farm into free protein. Black soldier fly larvae eat kitchen scraps, animal manure, spoiled produce, and compost. They convert that waste into larvae that are 42% protein and 35% fat. That's higher protein than commercial feed pellets, and it costs you nothing. A single bin of soldier fly larvae can process 5 pounds of organic waste per day. The larvae self-harvest by crawling up a ramp when they're mature. You collect them and feed them directly to your chickens, your quail, or even your fish. Here's the stacking connection. Remember that quail manure from the vertical layer above. It goes straight into the soldier fly bin. The larvae eat the manure, you feed the larvae back to the quail. Closed loop, 0 waste. Free feed cycling through your system endlessly. Set up a simple bin near your animal housing. A 5-gallon bucket with drainage holes works for beginners. A larger commercial bin handles more volume. Introduce a starter colony, feed it your scraps and manure, and within 3 weeks, you're harvesting free protein. This one layer alone can cut your feed bill by 30 to 40%. But the next layer adds something money can't buy. Item 4 is the canopy layer, fruit and nut trees. Most farmers think of trees as taking up space. Smart stackers know trees create space. A fruit or nut tree occupies vertical air that nothing else is using. The canopy provides shade for animals below. The roots pull nutrients from deep underground that surface crops can't reach. And the fruit gives you a harvest that requires almost 0 daily labor. One family in Georgia planted 8 dwarf apple trees across their half-acre. Under those trees, they run their chicken tractors. The chickens eat the fallen fruit, the windfall insects, and the pest larvae around the trunks. The trees get natural fertilization from the chicken manure. Both systems boost each other. Plant dwarf or semi-dwarf varieties so the canopy doesn't block all sunlight to your ground crops. Space them 10 to 15 feet apart. Choose varieties suited to your climate zone. Apple, pear, mulberry, and pecan are all excellent stacking trees. The key is placement. Plant your trees along the edges or through the center of your rotation area, so your chicken tractors can move beneath them. The shade also reduces heat stress on your birds during summer, which means better egg production and healthier animals. Item 5 is the border layer. Rabbits on the perimeter. Every property has edges. Fence lines, building walls, shed sides, boundary strips too narrow for garden beds or animal pens. This is where rabbits stack perfectly. Rabbit hutches fit along any fence line or wall without stealing usable ground from your main production areas. A single doe produces over 200 pounds of meat per year. With 10 does on your perimeter, you're looking at over $10,000 worth of meat annually from space you weren't even using. But here's the stacking secret. Rabbit manure is cold manure. It doesn't need composting. You can drop it directly onto garden beds without burning your plants. Position your hutches so the manure falls into collection trays, then spread it straight onto your growing areas. Build simple stackable hutches from wire and lumber. 2 tiers along a 20-foot fence line gives you room for 8 to 10 rabbits without using any interior property space. Provide hay, pellets, and fresh greens daily. Breed on a rotating schedule for consistent harvests every 10 to 12 weeks. Your borders just became one of the most productive zones on your entire property. Item 6 is the air layer. Bees above everything. Bees occupy a layer of your property that literally no other animal can use, the air. A single hive takes up about 2 square feet of ground space. That's it. But what it gives back is enormous. A strong hive produces 30 to 100 pounds of honey per year, plus beeswax, propolis, and royal jelly. All of that is either sellable or usable on your homestead. But the real value isn't the honey, it's the pollination. Bees pollinate your fruit trees, your garden vegetables, your cover crops, and your forage plants. Studies show that bee-pollinated gardens produce 20 to 30% higher yields than gardens without pollinators. That means your canopy layer produces more fruit, your ground layer grows more cover crops, your entire stacking system becomes more productive just because bees are flying through it. Place your hives on a raised stand near your fruit trees, but away from high-traffic animal areas. Face the entrance toward open sky so the flight path doesn't cross your working zones. Provide a water source nearby. 2 hives on a half acre is plenty to supercharge your entire stack. They require minimal management, maybe 30 minutes a week during peak season. The air layer connects everything below it, but there's one final layer that ties the whole system together. Item 7 is the water layer. Ducks or fish in small water features. If you have any water on your property, a pond, a stock tank, even a large rain catchment, you're sitting on an untapped production layer. Ducks thrive on small water features and produce eggs that sell for $8 to $12 a dozen at market. A small flock of 6 khaki Campbells can produce over 300 eggs per bird per year. That's 1,800 eggs annually from a system that takes up almost no extra land. If you don't have ducks, consider tilapia in a simple stock tank setup. Tilapia have a feed conversion ratio of 1.6 to 1. Meaning you get more protein per pound of input than almost any other livestock. They eat duckweed, algae, and kitchen scraps. In warm climates, you can harvest fresh fish in 6 to 9 months. Here's the stack. Ducks fertilize the water. Algae and duckweed grow from those nutrients. Fish eat the duckweed. You harvest the fish. The nutrient-rich water irrigates your garden beds. Every output becomes an input somewhere else. Set up a 300-gallon stock tank or dig a small lined pond. Add tilapia fingerlings or a small duck flock. Connect an overflow to your garden irrigation. The water layer closes the final loop in your stacking system. 7 layers, 1 property, every square foot earning its keep. I want to share something personal because I think it matters. 3 years ago, I was exactly where you might be right now. I had just under an acre, a small chicken flock, a garden that was doing okay, but nothing special. And I was convinced I'd hit my ceiling. I remember standing at the fence one morning thinking, I need more land. I was already spending over $100 a year on feed between the chickens and a few rabbits I'd added. My garden produced well in summer, but sat empty the rest of the year. Half my property was basically dead space. Fence lines growing weeds, a shed wall with nothing but dirt behind it. A patch of soggy ground near the downspout that I just mowed around. I was skeptical when I first read about stacking systems. It sounded like one of those permaculture fantasies that works great on paper, but falls apart in real life. But I was frustrated enough to try. I started with just 2 changes. I moved my rabbit hutches to the fence line and started running a chicken tractor through my garden beds instead of free ranging. Within 4 months, my feed costs dropped by $40 a month. My garden yield nearly doubled because the chicken tractor was doing the weeding, pest control, and fertilizing I used to do by hand. I got back about 6 hours a week in labor. That was the moment I became a convert, not because I read about it, because I measured it. Real numbers, real savings, real time back in my day. I added quail vertically that winter, then a soldier fly bin in spring, then bees that summer. Each layer locked into the one before it, and my property that I thought was maxed out started producing more food than it ever had. I didn't buy more land. I just stopped thinking flat. Now, before you start building your stack, let me save you from the mistakes that wreck most people's systems. Mistake 1 is stacking too many layers at once. This is the #1 killer. You get excited. Try to launch all 7 layers in the same month, and you're overwhelmed within 6 weeks. Every layer has a learning curve. Chickens need routine, quail need daily egg collection and tray cleaning. Soldier fly bins need consistent feeding. If you start everything simultaneously, nothing gets mastered and everything suffers. Add 1 layer at a time. Stabilize it for 60 to 90 days before adding the next. Patience builds systems that last. Mistake 2 is ignoring the connections between layers. Stacking isn't just putting animals in the same space. It's connecting their inputs and outputs. If your quail manure is going into a trash bag instead of your soldier fly bin, you've broken the loop. If your rabbit manure is piling up behind the hutch instead of landing on garden beds, you're wasting the whole point. Map every output to an input before you add a new layer. Mistake 3 is wrong placement. Where you put each layer matters more than what you put in it. Rabbit hutches in the center of your property steal prime ground space. Beehives facing your main walkway create conflict. Quail stacks in full sun overheat in summer. Walk your property with fresh eyes. Identify the dead zones, the edges, the vertical surfaces, the unused airspace. Place each layer where it fits naturally, without competing with another. Mistake 4 is skipping the ground layer. Some people want to jump straight to quail, or bees, because they sound exciting. But without the chicken tractor rotation building soil health underneath everything else, your whole stack sits on a weak foundation. Start at the ground, build up from there. Now picture your property 12 months from now. Your chicken tractor rotates through garden beds that practically plant themselves. Quail are stacked vertically in a corner of your shed, producing eggs daily without using a single square foot of ground space. Soldier fly larvae are converting every scrap of waste into free, high-protein feed that cycles back to your birds. Fruit trees shade your animals in summer and drop free harvests every fall. Rabbits line your fence producing meat and cold manure for your beds. Bees are pollinating everything in sight and boosting your yields by 20 to 30%. And a small water feature is closing the final nutrient loop. Your feed bill has dropped by 40% or more. Your production per square foot has tripled. Your labor has actually decreased because each system supports the others. Instead of demanding separate management, you didn't buy more land. You didn't go into debt. You didn't wait for someday. You just stopped wasting space and started stacking smart. That's the difference between a property that feels too small and a property that feeds your family with room to spare. Drop a comment below and tell me which layer you're adding to your property first. Ground, vertical, recycling, canopy, border, air, or water. I want to know where you're starting. If this video gave you a new way to look at your land, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. You don't need more land. You need more layers. The farmers who thrive on small acreage aren't the ones with the most space. They're the ones who refuse to waste a single square foot. Start stacking. Start today. Your land is already enough. A chicken tractor built from PVC pipe and hardware cloth can be assembled in a single afternoon for under $100 in materials. Wheels attached to one end of the tractor turn what would be a 2-person lift into a solo 5-minute move across the garden. Cover crop seed for the ground layer costs pennies per bed and establishes fast enough to feed chickens within 3 weeks of sowing. Buckwheat and crimson clover are 2 of the fastest establishing cover crops, both ready for chicken access in under a month. A 3 or 4 bed rotation gives chickens fresh ground constantly, while allowing each previous bed a full recovery cycle. Quail reaching laying age in 6 to 8 weeks, means a new cage bank started in spring is producing well before summer ends. Automatic waterers on the quail tier eliminate a daily chore that would otherwise consume real time across dozens of birds. A simple slanted collection tray under each quail tier lets manure funnel directly into a bucket without any scraping required. Coturnix quail tolerate cooler temperatures well, but need shade and ventilation to avoid heat stress during peak summer months. Black soldier fly larvae bins work fastest in warm, humid conditions, making summer the peak production season for this layer. A ramp inside the larvae bin lets mature larvae self-harvest by crawling out and dropping directly into a waiting feed tray. That self-harvesting design means the larvae essentially deliver themselves to the flock without requiring manual collection each day. The spent substrate left behind after larvae finish processing waste is itself a rich, pre-composted material ready for garden beds. Dwarf fruit trees selected for a specific climate zone typically begin bearing within 2 to 3 years of planting. Espaliered trees trained flat against a fence or wall produce a full harvest from a footprint under 2 feet deep. Planting fruit trees in guilds, with nitrogen-fixing plants and pest-deterrent herbs at the base, reduces the need for any sprayed input. Windfall fruit that chickens clean up under the trees also breaks the pest cycle for insects that overwinter in fallen fruit. A resting board placed in each rabbit cage prevents sore hocks, the most common health issue in rabbits kept on wire floors. Rabbit hutches stacked 2 tiers high keep the perimeter footprint small enough to tuck along nearly any fence line. A breeding schedule staggered across 3 does ensures a rolling harvest every few weeks instead of one large batch at once. 2 beehives spaced along the property border ensures redundancy. If one colony struggles, the other still pollinates everything. Beeswax rendered from cappings alone, without disturbing honey stores, provides enough material for a year of homemade candles. A Langstroth hive with removable frames makes inspection and honey harvest significantly easier for a beekeeper managing multiple layers. Bees foraging on clover, comfrey, and fruit tree blossoms rarely require supplemental feeding outside of extreme drought conditions. A 300-gallon stock tank for tilapia costs under $150 and can be set up in a weekend without any specialized plumbing knowledge. Duckweed grown in the same water as tilapia provides a self-renewing feed source that regenerates faster than the fish can eat it. Khaki Campbell ducks tolerate cold and wet conditions far better than standard chicken breeds, extending egg production through winter. A simple kiddie pool with a drain valve makes an inexpensive starter water feature for a small duck flock on any property. Overflow water from the duck or fish system, rich in nutrients, can be piped directly to nearby garden beds with basic tubing. Tracking which layer feeds. Which layer on a simple hand-drawn map clarifies the entire stack faster than holding it all in memory. A whiteboard near the coop door listing the current rotation schedule prevents accidentally leaving the tractor in one spot too long. The distance between layers matters. Placing quail, worms, and rabbits within a short walk keeps daily maintenance genuinely effortless. A stack that requires a long walk between layers gets neglected within weeks, no matter how well designed it looks on paper. Egg quality is often the first visible sign the stack is working, with yolks deepening in color within the first few weeks. Reduced feather pecking is another common report, since foraging occupies birds throughout the day instead of leaving them idle. The time investment for managing all 7 layers settles into roughly 30 minutes a day, once routines are fully established. That 30 minutes replaces what would otherwise be hours spent hauling feed bags and managing separate, disconnected systems. A property running this full stack for multiple years shows compounding soil improvement that continues well beyond the first season. Soil organic matter on stacked beds typically climbs year over year as rabbit and chicken manure cycle back in continuously. That improving soil means every subsequent planting grows faster and produces more than the cycle that came before it. The system genuinely gets easier and more productive with time, which is the opposite of how most people expect farming to behave. None of these 7 layers require expensive equipment. Most can be built from materials already sitting around most properties. The real investment here is attention and sequence, not dollars, which is exactly what most people underestimate before starting. Small acreage was never the limiting factor in any of this. Thinking flat, instead of thinking in layers, always was. Every layer feeding the next is the entire design philosophy, repeated across 7 simple, low-cost, proven connections. That's the shift from a property that feels maxed out to one that quietly produces more every single season. Stacking isn't more work than spreading out. It's the same amount of daily attention pointed in a direction that compounds. That's the whole difference between a property that plateaus and one that keeps producing more from the exact same footprint. 7 layers, 1 property, and a farmer who finally stopped asking for more land and started asking for a better layout.